Hey everyone, welcome to 2024 in the first database security office hours of 2024. We're on the Ask Tom platform as usual. New platform a little bit. They've done some tweaking. They've painted some things, changed some drapes and curtains, and replaced the rug. It looks great. It's performing great. We really like how we can access it from the host end too here. So. My name is Richard Evans, and I'm the host of the Database Security Office Hours, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Dan Morgan. Dan has got an extensive resume. He'll talk a little bit about that as we go, but Dan and I are going to talk about maximizing your security and kind of minimizing your headache with Oracle database proxy users. Okay. This session is being recorded and will be available in a week or so on the Ask Tom platform, bit.ly/AskTomDBSec. Or basically just go back to where you joined from this session. Where you joined is from this Ask Tom platform. That QR code is for you to register if you'd like to register for the series and our future monthly calls. We do hold this call on the second Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. U.S. Central. We keep it consistent at 10 a.m. U.S. Central, regardless of daylight savings or spring forward fallback, whichever we're in. And we always have an announcement section, a technical topic, then a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. If you're not comfortable asking your question in the Q&A panel, you're always welcome to reach out. I'll share my email in the chat, and you could reach out offline to us. Okay. All right, let's get started with some announcements. We always talk about patching, right? Patching is one of the most important things you can do to secure your investment and your data in the Oracle database or on any platform you're utilizing. So quarterly patches will roll around here in a week or so. There's a couple notes that we like to point you to, that 888.1 and the 555.1 that talk about the proactive patching programs, as well as recommended one-off patches. And the critical patch updates, security alerts, and bulletins are all available on oracle.com/security-alerts. If you are a customer utilizing real application clusters, take a look at fleet patching and provisioning. Fleet patching and provisioning hopefully can help you streamline your grid infrastructure and your database patching, make your life a little bit easier every quarter or every month if you're patching every month. And as usual, Mike Dietrich's blog. Mike Dietrich is the expert on all things patching and upgrades. So check out MikeDietrichDE.com for information on what's going on in the world of Oracle upgrades and patches. We have a cool slide here where we talk about common criteria. So Oracle 19C is certified common criteria. It has the certification for it. And we've started that process for Oracle Database 23C. Okay, so if this is something you need for your organization, if you have a government customer and you need this, understand that this is in the works for us, and we will let you know when 23C is available and certified common criteria. 19C has been out there for a little while now, so there's a blog that you can go check out if you're interested in more information on this. Okay. Another exciting thing around the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Identity and Access Management is it supports non-default domains. So most of our customers want to use a custom or a non-default domain there for them. So you can use this for user and application authentication or authorizations. There's no change necessary if you're using that default domain. And this has been around for a little while, but it's generally available now for all the platforms: Autonomous Database Serverless, Dedicated, Exadata Cloud Services, Base Database Services, and Exadata Cloud at customers. So if you're looking for OCI IAM integration and you're using a non-default domain, we've got this documented and available for you on all cloud platforms. Okay. For today's conversation, the Oracle Support Corner, I want to point you to two document links. The first one is the Database Security Guide, and it talks about configuring authentication. So that's authentication in general, and you'll see in there the schema-only accounts that we're going to talk about today, and then the proxy authentication, the connect on behalf of capabilities in there as well. And the second is a JDBC link, which has a really good section on utilizing proxy authentication from like a JDBC connection there, okay? And then my Oracle support has a note on proxy users and auditing proxy users that's available for you. And all of these are available on that QR code on the screen. So I try to put all of these links out there for you, and I'll paste these in the chat right now. I'll try to make them so that you can click on the links. I don't know that you'll be able to copy and paste out of the chat, but I hope you'll have a record of that chat at the end of the Zoom. I think it should save to your hard drive is, hey, this is what was put in the chat. But you can always reach out to me and ask about these links or use that QR code to get to the GitHub repository where I've documented this information for you. So after you look at the documentation and any of the My Oracle support notes, you can go over to Oracle Live Labs and kick the tires on proxy user authentication. So we have a short little lab out there that shows you how you can allow a developer to access application data without knowing that application schema password, right? So we want to create a developer account and let them inherit those privileges of that application schema without them ever logging into that. And today, Dan's got a better, a more robust configuration that he'll show you. That's kind of a 3-tier architecture here for this process. This gets you started, and then you can build from there. So any of our live labs out there, you can either run in our domain. We've got probably 25 or so that you can run on the Oracle Live Labs platform, and then 40 or so total, and you could pull those into your tenancy and then kick the tires on it and go off script, right? So take that lab and then take what you've learned today and say, well, I could create this 3-tier kind of configuration here with my app, my broker, and my application user if I do it like this. And think about what you can do. You can go off script on any of these labs. So use the Oracle Live Labs that we have available to you. Utilize the Oracle Live Labs platform where you can do that green button and run it on our dime and then kick the tires on it. It's really a great learning opportunity for you, okay? Another learning opportunity comes up here in about 2 weeks. So I'll be talking about Oracle Database Vault on the Oracle Tech Lounge. We've got 2 upcoming database security events that I want to point you to. These are at UK time. So double check that time there, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. UK time on January 24th. And then Pedro Lopes will talk about maximum security architecture for regulatory compliance a couple weeks after me on February 7th. And so Pedro is the product manager of DBSat. So he'll talk about kind of utilizing Oracle's maximum security architecture to meet your regulatory compliance needs. So again, good training opportunities, good learning opportunities that we have available to you here on Oracle Database Security products, features, and capabilities. All right, Dan, let's get started on this presentation, sir.
Okay, well, we're right on time for this, so let's go ahead and start talking about proxy users. The first slide in here is just a quick bio slide on me. I'm going to spend absolutely no time talking about it other than to point out that I don't know that guy whose picture is on the right. And on the left, you'll find my email address. So if you want to get a hold of me directly, feel free to send me emails at that address. Otherwise, you can reach me through Rich or lots of other places. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about the business case first, because one of the things I find critically important when we talk about security is, okay, there's this thing called database vault. There's this thing called proxy users. Why should I care? What does it do? What's the business problem that it's going to solve? So if I go to my management and I say, we've got a business problem and I have a solution, they understand that they need to pay attention. If you just say, hey, there's this really cool technology, they're going, yeah, but why do we need it? So we're going to talk about that and get into the architecture as well. So let's talk about that business case. The business case that we've got around proxy users is first that you've got to identify a business problem. So the business problems that our chief information security officers are focusing on, that our VPIT, CIOs, CTOs are looking at, is they're being required to meet a lot of internal governance and external regulatory requirements. They're being required to pay attention to zero trust architecture. They're being required to address issues of separation of duties, principle of least privilege compliance, passing audits from STIG or from Center for Internet Security, or from a parent organization. I've got banks that have auditors going through there talking about their IT as well. We're looking at, through the use of proxy users, satisfying in one technology that's already in your existing license and has been since Oracle version 9, solving a lot of these problems. So this has been fully documented and fully supported since 9.2. And this is the solution to a lot of these problems, including the fact that it gives you, by default, multi-factor authentication without having to spend large sums of money doing integration with other enterprise things. So definitely a solution to a lot of serious business problems. Next, why should I care? This is my favorite section because a lot of times when we're talking to people who are technologists, there's a disconnect between how does this technology impact my organization, but also how does this technology impact me? So this is a technology that we are deploying and customers are deploying worldwide. So it doesn't matter what country you're in, it doesn't matter what state or province or region you're in, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. So this is, again, solving issues that have been mandated by government agencies and by regulatory authorities saying, you need to do this. And we're looking around for solutions. In this case, that solution's been around for decades, but unfortunately, a lot of our technologists don't know about it. It also solves issues around ransomware, around zero trust architecture, around meeting compliance with HIPAA or PCI DSS. Next slide. But I want to make this personal for everyone here. And the impact here is not theoretical. So 31% of cyber attacks have cost people jobs, not necessarily people in IT, but the impact on the finances of organizations lead to layoffs. They lead to downsizing. And for people who are in IT, 25% of workers lost their jobs in the last 12 months after a cybersecurity mistake. This really has a significant impact that you can feel personally in your own life. And a Google search will show you this for those of you who are interested in perhaps doing what Rich and I do. Unemployment rate for people who are experienced workers in cybersecurity has been zero. There's been zero unemployment since 2011. There's not a lot of industry sectors that can claim that level of importance to the people who have it. We're not worried about AI taking our jobs away. So how proxy users work, this is something that's needs to be dealt with because proxy users are just normal users. Create user is the same proxy or non-proxy. It's whether that user is proxying. And what proxying means is acting on behalf of another user. So let's say I have a user named System. System does certain work, or sysbackup. Sysbackup does certain work. Rather than logging in as that user, can I get someone else to essentially inherit the ability to do that job? Now, you can't do this for sys or sysdba, but you can do this for almost everything else in an Oracle database. And typically, if we have 10,000 users in an application, we have to go out and individually provision 10,000 users. New person comes into the organization, we have to provision them. They need this role, this role, this role, this permission. They need to be able to log on. They need to be able to go to here and do this work. What proxy users allow you to do is to literally do all of that provisioning through a single user. So I can say, these 500 people are going to be in accounts payable. These 150 people are going to work in general ledger. And I can do it all through a single account with a single SQL statement. It's a massive improvement in management and cost lowering. So let's look at how this is done from an architecture and syntax standpoint. I'm going to start off with the application schema. And for the illustration I'm going to do today, I'm going to use the Oracle default HR schema just to illustrate this. But the application schema, in this case, owns all the objects. It owns the entire application. tables, views, stored procedures, sequences, triggers, whatever those things might be. But what we've done is we've taken all the privileges away from it. And when I say all the privileges, including the privilege to connect to the database. So you have an application schema that can't even connect to the database. We create a new user, a new schema called a privilege broker. What's significant about the privilege broker is the privilege broker has all the privileges. The app doesn't have them, the privilege broker has them. And the privilege broker has no objects. So you attack the application, there's no privileges. You can't do anything. You attack the privilege broker, there are no objects. You can't do anything. Then we create a class of users, which are the application users. What's significant about them is that they have no objects and they have no privileges. So if you've been around Oracle for very long, you're thinking to yourself, how am I going to connect to an Oracle database if I don't have any privileges at all? I don't even have create session or the connect role. We're going to show you how to do that. And one of the things I want to emphasize here, which I forgot to do yesterday when I did this presentation, is that for larger organizations, for more complex organizations, where let's say you've got an application where it's used by multiple departments or multiple divisions within your organization, the concept of the privilege broker can be broken up into multiple privilege brokers. So you could have one privilege broker for the finance department where they assign their own people and give their people privileges, and at no risk. It's not like you need a DBA. Same thing, the manufacturing division could have their own privilege broker and assign somebody there to address that mapping of privileges to people. And again, it can be done with just a single SQL statement. So let's go on to the next one and provision this along with the SQL that does it. So I come to the HR schema, it's already, or my application is already installed, and it's probably authenticated with a password. Well, if anybody gets the user ID and password, they can successfully attack my application. I don't want that. So we're going to do an alter user, no authentication, and we're going to take away the password so that now nobody can connect to the application. That's impossible to do. Now we're going to go to the next step and we're going to create 3 roles. One is an admin role, which has the create session and also the ability to do what it needs to do to administer the application. We have a user role. The user has the read privilege, so they can do select statements and they can do inserts of new transactions. And we have a read-only role. And you'll notice that all 3 of these roles have the create session privilege. The roles granted to someone can connect to the database, can connect to the application, but the create session has been hidden inside of roles that the application doesn't have and the privilege broker doesn't have. Let's go to the next piece of the puzzle. We create the privilege broker. And again, the privilege broker is created with no authentication, but a temporary table space. So the app can't connect, the privilege broker can't connect. Somebody needs to have those roles to be able to connect. Let's look at the application users. The application users aren't just normal user. Now we've given them names here of Proxy Dan for me, Proxy Rich for Richard, and I have no idea who Proxy Larry is, but it seemed like a good name for that third user. And each one of them has a password. So they are normal users with a user ID and password, but note that they have no privileges and no objects. They can't do anything either. So all 3 of these pieces of the puzzle can't do anything. And that means an attacker who phishes credentials, gets a user ID, gets a password, they can't do anything either. The secret of proxy users is what we're going to show you next. I alter the user, which is the broker, and grant permission to the application user with the role. So the broker doesn't have the ability to connect, but the broker has the ability to let the end user connect using a particular role with a particular set of privileges that include the create session. We can create a second user who is our HR user, and they have a different set of privileges. And we have a third user who's our read-only user who has an even more limited set of privileges. But you can see here what we've got is that it's only through the broker granting that role that anybody can connect and that anybody can access the database application, but only with the privileges they were given. So if you look over here in back 1 second, Rich. So if you look at the things that I've highlighted here in blue, alter user, grant connect through, with role, go to the next slide. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've taken the syntax wire diagram out of docs.oracle.com and highlighted the pieces I use so that you can map the pieces of the syntax that I specifically used for this illustration to exactly what's there. Grant connect through, the name of the proxy user, and then with role, the name of the role, which would be HR user or HR admin, and then authentication required. So everything is completely as secure as we can make it in an Oracle database. And let's go to the next slide and take a look at how this is going to happen. So Proxy Dan, that's me, is going to log in, and instead of logging in with username / password at service name, I've added one extra thing in here, which is the priv broker, and you can see the priv broker right there in the in square brackets. That's saying that I am going to connect. Well, keep in mind, Proxy Dan doesn't have the ability to connect. I'm going to connect based on the role that's been granted to me by the privilege broker, and that's the only way I can connect. So that one piece is how we define multi-factor authentication. Look at the number of things it takes to log on now. I have to know my username. I have to know my password. I have to know the service name of the database I'm connecting to. I also need to have a fourth factor, which is the name of the priv broker. And the priv broker doesn't have to be something obvious like priv broker. It could be a string of 100 random characters that gets hard-coded into an application server. So the application server takes my logon and now adds that piece in. So as an end user, this is all completely transparent. Let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of this. If we test this out by using syscontext and we look at, for auditing purposes, who's the proxy user? Who's the current user? What's the schema that we're connecting to? You can see that auditing is going to allow me to know that Proxy Dan is acting on behalf of the priv broker. And the work I'm doing is as priv broker, but it's auditable as Proxy Dan or Proxy Rich. Let's go ahead. So the DevOps questions I want to ask you are rhetorical, and I'm meant to get the answers into here. Let's see if Rich saved me from myself. He didn't. I'll go ahead and put the answers in here, but let's just do this right now verbally. So are the application users that we've just shown you here still required to provide a password managed by a profile that controls password length, password complexity, expiration? Absolutely. It's a normal create user. Oh, Rich, you did save me from myself. Thank you. All the normal password policies apply. So you can do everything without altering your current process other than how you deal with permissions.
Yeah, Dan, the proxy user you're talking about here would be Proxy Dan, Proxy Rich, Proxy Larry.
Yep.
All of those still comply with this profile, password management, expiration, all that information. Absolutely.
So next slide. If 10,000 users can connect to the application, how many users need to be managed to change the privileges? The answer is only one. It's the privilege broker. Somebody can log in and do an alter of the roles, and the privilege broker can continue to grant those same roles with different privileges, or the privilege broker can grant privileges based on roles that have been created. Okay, is every action a user takes audited? No change from anything, whether you're using traditional auditing, fine-grained auditing, unified auditing. Absolutely no change to your auditing. You don't have to do anything significantly different. Next. Is multi-factor authentication built in by default? As you saw, user ID, password, service name, and the name of the privilege broker. All four pieces of the puzzle have to be provided. So clearly, yes. if you give someone your valid user ID and password and the name of the database, would they be able to log in? Think about this. If you were to take your user ID, your password, and your database name, and you put that out on Facebook right now, how long would it be before somebody successfully attacks your database? In minutes, maybe in seconds. With this design here, you can do that. I'm not recommending anybody do this, but you could do that and nobody could break into your database because it's insufficient. There's a fourth factor. And not only is there a fourth factor, but they wouldn't even know that you would use proxy users. They'd have no way of knowing that. And they wouldn't even know anything about what you had done that user ID and password put out there. I did this years ago as part of a test at the University of Washington, and people accused us of providing bad information, of saying, oh, you didn't give us the right password. You didn't give us the right service name. That's why we couldn't break in. And we went, no, that's not the reason. And no one ever successfully broke into an Oracle database where we'd set up proxy users, even when we gave them user IDs and passwords. They could not figure out what we had done. Next slide. How many escalated privilege schemas do you require for doing this? One. Only one. You're only monitoring the privilege broker because the privilege broker is the one that's putting out the privileges. And if you have two privilege brokers, you'd be monitoring two of them, or three privilege brokers. For a really large organization, you might have three people you have to monitor, as opposed to we have an organization with 10,000 users, and now we got to audit this massive number of people, all of whom can grant privileges or assign roles or make changes. Also, would password rollover allow for zero downtime password changes? Yes. So with this structure, password rollover still works exactly the same way it does now, which means that once you're in 18C or above and you've got password rollover available to you, you would be able to use that and do zero downtime password changes for your end users. It would still work exactly the way it does now. Yes, you can use the privilege broker in every version of Oracle database, including 9.2. So 9.2, 10.1, 10.2, 11.1, 11.2, 12.1, 12.2, every version, every 18 and every 19. So absolutely, this literally goes all the way back to 9.2. Would there be a negative impact on availability, performance, or stability? Not at all. This is about how we manage and secure the database. Otherwise, it is completely transparent. RAC, Data Guard, there is no Oracle technology. Golden Gate, we've used proxy users for Golden Gate so that when Golden Gate connects to the database, it proxies in and secured that Golden Gate connection. We've done this with OEM. We've done this with RMAN. We've done this with essentially every piece of the technology stack. So this works with all the different pieces. And I'm going to pass the baton over to Rich right now. And Rich is going to talk about this from the standpoint of each of these specific pieces and show you how they continue to work.
Thanks, Dan. So when Dan logged in, he logged in using that Priv broker. I'm logging in here as Proxy Rich with Priv broker as well, my password connecting to my pluggable database. And when I log in, I can see what's going on with that session. So I can see that syscontext shows me who my proxy user is. I'm Proxy Rich, although like Dan showed, the current user may be Priv broker, the session user may be Priv broker, but we can get this identifying information about the session here. So we can see what my ID is and all this. And the important thing is you can then use that in all sorts of creative ways, whether you're doing authentication with Kerberos or centrally managed users, OCI, IAM, or Azure Active Directory integration, that traditional unified auditing, VPD, data redaction, database vault. The list kind of goes on where how we can utilize and see this information about my session as a proxy user. So let me give you an example here of Kerberos authentication and proxy users. So the first thing I would do is create myself here as an externally identified user from my Kerberos server, probably Active Directory. That's the most common use case we see here. And I'm going to authorize R. Evans to connect and to utilize that Priv broker schema and the rights that come with that. Okay, so you can see that connect through R. Evans here. And then one of the neat things is traditionally, when you would use Kerberos from the command line, you would do /@PDB1, right? Well, like Dan pointed out, RC Evans, Proxy Rich, Proxy Dan, Proxy Larry, they all lack that create session privilege. So on their own, they can't authenticate. They have no create session privileges. But if I make a small change here in the way I connect using Kerberos, and I put that square bracket there where I've got that priv broker in that square bracket, I can now authenticate using Kerberos through that priv broker account. And you can see here that my proxy user is R. Evans. My current user is priv broker. And then I added an additional query onto Dan's original query here of enterprise identity. So I want to know who I really am when I'm coming using that enterprise identity there. So real cool capability of if you're using this currently and you're saying, oh, well, we're using Kerberos and how does this work in a Kerberos environment? You can see right here that you just put that in square brackets and we can connect and we can utilize those privileges or roles we inherit from that priv broker connection. Now, if we introduce centrally managed users and a shared schema concept here, I'm going to drop my user. So I don't have a dedicated user or a dedicated schema on this database. This is probably a much more flexible way of deploying these enterprise users. So like Dan had said, if you're doing 10,000 databases with 10,000 users, you don't want to have to manage these users on an individual basis on a 10,000 database one by one. So I drop my RC Evans account and I've created this shared schema. So this infrastructure is already here from setting up Kerberos and setting up my centrally managed users and using my Active Directory integration. And I'm going to take advantage of that CMU shared schema that I've created. So again, RC Evans tries to log in. He lacks that create session privilege. He cannot log in. He has to utilize that priv broker in order to do the Kerberos authentication, take the privileges from that priv broker schema, then I can authenticate. And when I authenticate, you can see the difference here now is that proxy user is a shared schema. So 10,000 different users that are accessing your database are logging in as if they are that shared schema. They inherit the privileges they get from that alter user grant connect. And like Dan put in there, different roles, HR admin, HR user, read only. But my enterprise identity shows up here as who I am according to Active Directory. So if you can integrate this proxy user capability into your enterprise environment pretty easily here the way we've shown it today. So really, really cool stuff that we have that's been around for 20 years, right? Now, if you're going to audit, traditional auditing in 19C and older, like Dan already pointed out, we're going to audit here on behalf of priv brokers. So when Proxy Dan authenticates, we can see this. If we want to audit priv broker by access, we can do that. And I pulled this query from the My Oracle support note 728078.1 to give you an idea of how in a traditional audit, you can relate one audit record to the other. And that comes down to that proxy session ID. So you can see that they link that proxy session ID to a session ID in the query. And we can see that Proxy Dan queried it, Proxy Rich queried it, and we can get this information out of the traditional audit records. Okay. Now, in unified audit policies with 12C and higher, we can do something maybe a little simpler here where we can take that syntax with our sys context and we can create an audit policy around it. So we can say, we want to create a unified audit policy that audits all actions on HR employees when that proxy user is not null. It doesn't matter who that proxy user is in this case. We just want to know that it's a proxy user accessing this HR table, and we want to audit what they're doing there. Then when we review the audit record, we've simplified it a little bit with unified audit where we have that dedicated column there. So we can see that we've got Proxy Dan doing a select star from HR employees, and we've got Proxy Rich doing a select count from HR employees. So real powerful stuff here where we're using that built-in sys context to audit what's going on with our proxy users. And again, like Dan said, we don't have to change anything. We are not, anytime you create or you authorize another user to proxy, or if you have your enterprise users, we should capture this information here because that proxy user value is not null for them. Same thing with virtual private database. So with VPD, if you want to create a little function here that looks at who the proxy user is and then either returns 1 = 1 or 1 = 0. So we append an additional where clause onto our SQL. We can do that with VPD, and we can identify who the proxy user is, whether it's null or not, and then let VPD make decisions on whether the columns should be returned with data or how many rows should be returned to the user. That kind of information we can do with VPD, okay? Same thing with data redaction. Same thing, utilizing that sys context. And so here I combined it into one statement where I said, hey, the proxy user is not null. And if it's not Dan, then I want you to redact the data. So in this case, only proxy Dan should be seeing that phone number column on HR.employees. Any other user, proxy Rich, proxy Larry, or the other 9,998 users we have should not see that phone number column there. Okay. Now, Database Vault, if you're working in a Database Vault environment, Database Vault adds an additional layer of protection here for you. So Database Vault says, well, I don't know that you want those proxy users to be able to access realm protected data or command rule protected data. So I'm going to need you to authorize that for me. So in this case, what we do is we've got our proxy Dan. We allowed proxy Dan to authenticate through our priv broker. And as Dan granted the privileges, the read privilege on that employee table, Database Vault says, hold on. Dan is using priv broker's privileges. I haven't been told that's okay yet. So we're going to authorize that with Database Vault. We're going to say, yes, it's fine that proxy Dan can utilize the priv broker privileges that we have. And so it's got that second layer of security there. So there could be a use case where proxy Dan needs to do it, but proxy Rich or proxy Larry don't need to access this HR data. Database Vault allows you to add that mandatory access control in there, right? So a lot of times I use the example of accessing things within my house, right? I invite you over and I say, make yourself at home. Well, Database Vault says, well, but you can't go in the medicine cabinet. You can't go in the jewelry and leave Rich's beer fridge alone, right? And then I can say, no, the beer fridge is fine. Just bring me one too, okay? So we can authorize that capability with Database Vault to allow that proxy granting to either to be allowed or disallowed within your database, okay? Another thing you can do that isn't just Database Vault, but is a real cool use case here is if you have a set of users that may need to create users or alter users or drop users, but you don't want them to have that capability all the time, we could create that PDB DV account manager with no authentication, right? So it has create session, but it has no password. So there's no way for anyone to take advantage and utilize that account. We give it the Database Vault account manager role so it can change passwords and do all that. And then we're going to let Proxy Rich go ahead and utilize its capabilities there by authorizing it, okay? Then what we can say is, okay, if I'm logging in and I want to conduct some activity where I want to create a user, drop a user, alter a user, Proxy Rich doesn't have those capabilities. Proxy Rich has to utilize those capabilities that he was granted on behalf of from that no authentication, that schema only user there, right? So real neat things you could do. You could do this with maybe some roles like Dan has shown where, hey, we've got some application access that we need to only allow during certain times, right? Dan, yesterday we talked about how rather than creating new accounts or deploying these things, you could simply grant or revoke that connect through for a user through some kind of an automated process, right?
Yeah, I have customers that have used this technique, and I'll give you a really quick example. They might have 30 or 40 DBAs in their entire organization, and every night they'll have 3 DBAs who are responsible for staying up all night long and dealing with anything that goes wrong. What they do is they use proxy users, and rather than giving people the DBA privileges 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, those 3 people who are going to be the on-call DBAs that night, they give them the broker is used to give them the privileges to log on and do their activities. Nobody else can log on. It's really, really safe. The next day, 3 other people are going to be the on-call DBAs. They grant them the on-call DBA privs, and it's one SQL statement to completely provision or completely deprovision any user.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant. It cuts their maintenance costs and it cuts their security issues down, because now instead of 50 people having all the privs,
Mm-hmm.
they can change it in 3 SQL statements. They can change it
Mm-hmm.
once every 24 hours based
Yeah.
on a calendar.
Yeah. And if you have a help desk or a level one, you know, uh, team, they can have a limited subset of privileges that you allow them to have access to. So really, really a neat capability here that we'd like to see more customers take advantage of.
Yeah, and if you go back to that syntax diagram, that wire diagram that we have a few
Mm-hmm.
slides earlier,
Yeah.
you'll see the fact that where you're assigning roles, we did this demo to make it really simple with one privilege broker and one role
Mm-hmm.
and 3 application users. You could have multiple privilege brokers, as I mentioned. You could
Yeah.
also assign multiple roles. So you could have a base role, and then you could have other roles that you grant and revoke from time to time. This is a major solution to a huge number of business problems. And
Yeah.
this is the issue that we've seen with proxy users, is that proxy users have been sitting out there as a capability, but we haven't really seen a good mapping of here's the business case, here's the business problem. I've got 50 DBAs, and I don't want to provision all 50 DBAs with every privilege in the world, just the ones who are working tonight. That's a major problem. Here's a solution to that major problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your example here with the with role capability, because that's not something I had done before here, where we add that Larry logs in on behalf of Proof Broker and he has only that read-only role. So it really gives that flexibility. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One SQL statement I take away read only. One
Mm.
SQL statement I grant him HR admin.
Yep.
The following morning, I take away HR admin. I put him back on read only.
Yep. Yeah. 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 Real powerful stuff here, Dan. Cool. You want to finish us off here for a final thought?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got a couple of final thoughts. And one of the things I want to make sure everyone's aware of is that the Security Exchange Commission of the United States issued a change to Rule 17 effective December 15th of last year. If you're not familiar with it, highly recommend you find the people who work for your CISO and make sure that you are updated on what those new disclosure rules are. Because for organizations that fall under SEC reporting, you are going to find that what you are required to do for compliance has just gotten a lot more specific in terms of what has to be reported, when it has to be reported, and what qualifies for you must report it. So be sure you're up to date on that. A lot of this is coming under the fact that back in January of 2022, the Executive Office of the President, Office of Management and Budget, literally said, you need to be doing these things. This is no longer optional. Homeland Security and CISA are now doing audits and enforcing them. And I know people that have had some major legal problems where the federal government has gone after them for non-compliance. And one of the things that the Office of Management Budget required was that customers welcome external partners. In other words, don't take this on as an internal thing where the people who built your systems or designed your systems or deployed them are the ones who are deciding whether it is or is not sufficient. They're saying you need to welcome external partners. Of course, that would include Oracle partners that you're currently working with. That would include those of us here at Oracle who can provide that external expertise for doing this. Next slide. Part of what you can do to assist yourselves, and this is one of the ways that as an external partner, Oracle can help you, is that we have 2 things which you can use to enhance your security at zero cost to your organization. The first one is a download. Product management has created and released a product which you can get off the web. I've got the URL here. Well, I thought I had it here.
Now
Isn't it here?
yeah, that's the where you can download it from my.
Oh, where you can download it. Okay, of course, good.
Yeah.
Because I was sure that we provided that. DBSAT, which allows you to do a security assessment on many aspects of your Oracle database and will give you back a report that may point out some of the things that you need to be thinking in terms of enhancing your security, enhancing your compliance, making sure that you can pass audits. And that's from product management. From Oracle Professional Services, which is my group, we have something called attack surface reduction workshops. And the workshops are complimentary. There is no cost for them. There is no paperwork. There is nothing to sign. Any Oracle customer that has an Oracle database license, and it requires one database with one license for one CPU core, so that we qualify you, can send an email to askforus@oracle.com and say, we would like to have a workshop for all of the members of our technical teams, our information security people, and think of it as essentially a free hour and a half of consulting from Oracle Consulting Services. And we have a couple of prepared workshops around Oracle database, around identity management, around zero trust that we can provide to you. Or we can spend that time doing question and answers, whatever you want. So not often that you can just pick up the phone or send an email and say, I want an hour and a half of Dan Morgan's time to assist us with a security issue, but this is a mechanism for doing that. And part of what's included in the workshop is that I do a live attack in SQL Plus using a very sophisticated technique so that you get a real sense of what an attack looks like. A real attack on an Oracle database does not look like anything that you've ever seen in a movie. So that's something that we can offer to you. Both of these are complimentary. One's a download, one's a workshop. So Rich, I'm passing the baton back to you again.
Okay. Yeah, let's kind of close it out here and we'll get to some more Q&A. I've been trying to keep up. There's some really great ones.
Yeah, and I've been answering. I'm answering a couple of them right now.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dan. So as I said at the beginning, I've got this GitHub repository out there. I will put some more of the actual examples out there. And then Dan also said you can contact him via email and get it as well. But I'll update this GitHub repository to include some of the example code that we've got out there. But we've got about a year and a half worth of notes out there, little cheat sheets for you to watch or read as you follow along with our Database Security Office Hours videos. And then please mark your calendar to join us next month on Wednesday, February 14th. Dan, is that Valentine's Day? 14th?
I think it is.
I think it is. Even better, you get to spend Valentine's Day with me. So I think we're going to be talking about updates to Oracle Data Safe in February. So mark your calendar for that. This recording will be available, I don't know, probably next week sometime. I'll get it processed and over to the team that uploads it. But this recording and 4+ years worth of material are available out there on the Ask Tom platform, bit.ly/AskTomDB.